Doesn't the picture usually come up? There. Welcome to this evening's Eden Prairie City Council meeting, the last council meeting of 2019, and our last city council meeting with our city attorney, Rick Grosso. I believe this is the 1,373rd council meeting for you. I really have no idea. I'm just making that number up, but it's probably really close. So this Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019 council meeting is now called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a brief announcement about Open Podium, which is an invitation to all of our residents. It's an opportunity for Eden Prairie residents to address the City Council on issues related to Eden Prairie City government before each council meeting, which are typically held the first and third Tuesdays of each month from 6:30 to 6:55 p.m. in this council chamber. If you wish to speak at Open Podium, please contact the city manager's office at 952-949-8412 by noon of the meeting date with your name, your phone number, and the subject matter so that we can be prepared for your topic. If time permits, after scheduled speakers are finished, the mayor will open the floor to unscheduled speakers. Open Podium is not recorded or televised. If you have questions about Open Podium, please contact the city manager's office. In Eden Prairie, the City Council also operates as the HRA, the Housing Redevelopment Authority, and we have an HRA meeting this evening within our City Council meeting. So I now call the HRA meeting to order. Please have roll call.
Councilmember Aho.
Here.
Councilmember Freiberg.
Here.
Councilmember Narayan.
Here.
Councilmember Nelson.
Here.
Chair Case.
Here. So our order of business tonight is to approve the minutes from our last HRA meeting and then to adopt a resolution. So is there a motion? And I'm assuming there are no, I should probably ask, any issues or questions that you've raised from the minutes of the last HRA meeting? Hearing none, then go ahead. Is there somebody that would make a motion for approval?
I would move to approve the HRA minutes from September 3rd, 2019 meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. So our issue for this meeting tonight, two of them actually, two resolutions. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, members of the HRA. We do have two items of action. The first one is related to the 2020 budget. So the last HRA meeting held in September, you approved a preliminary levy and budget for the HRA of $200,000. That levy has been consistent for a number of years because that is the amount of money that's allocated for staff to focus on housing and redevelopment issues. As you know, and you'll actually see in the regular budget presentation, we do quite a bit with housing and redevelopment. We have many other funding sources besides this levy. This levy alone is not our housing and redevelopment budget, but it is a tool that the HRA has to raise money. So we are asking that you finalize tonight that HRA levy, and then later on we're going to have a presentation on the city budget. I'm going to cover a little bit of some of our housing projects, but the action here would be to certify the HRA's property tax levy and budget for 2020.
Could I just ask a question? I had been at a meeting with some neighboring mayors, and they were discussing that they have an HRA budget line item that they use for affordable housing, and it was significantly greater than $200,000. Now, from what you just said, that we have other resources and tools, as part of the Affordable Housing Task Force report back to us, could that be a little piece or component just to lay out for us again what those tools are, how much money is at our disposal, and then in that conversation, not tonight, because we're going to set this tonight at $200,000. This would have been a conversation topic for before, I think. But could we have, as part of the Affordable Housing Task Force, a conversation on, is it time to look at the tool of this fund here, the actual tax levy, and see if it's time to maybe raise that, realizing completely that it impacts our residents' taxes, and that one of the reasons this has been consistently approved is that it raises taxes 0% each year because we keep it the same at 200,000. I just would like to know if it's a tool that other cities are using. Should we be looking at that down the road? And I don't know if that's okay with the rest of you, just to have that conversation come back to us. I know you've, Councilmember Nelson, actually raised this for several years. Is it time to maybe look at raising it? I think Councilmember Freiberg had talked about that as well. So if that's an understanding, that's okay. If there's no other discussion, maybe, okay, go ahead and someone can make a motion.
Move to adopt the resolution certifying the 2020 HRA property tax levy to be $200,000 and improving the 2020 HRA budget of $200,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further conversation? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a good segue because this next item is a method in which the HRA does use its powers and its funding authority to provide for affordable housing. So in this particular instance, this is, we have a couple different items. We have a redevelopment, a resolution that's going to modify the redevelopment plan for a tax increment financing district for the Prairie apartments. So this is part of the Presbyterian Homes development that you approved for first reading at a previous meeting, and actually it's on the consent agenda for second reading and final agreement. But you're also approving an interfund loan and authorizing the execution of a tax increment financing agreement. So this is an example of where the city's HRA is using approximately $8 million in tax increment financing to provide affordable housing for the Paravel development. I know staff could answer any questions that you have. There's quite a bit of documentation in the packet related to tax increment financing, but this is for the Paravel development as part of the Presbyterian Homes project.
Council, any questions, comments to make?
No questions, but I think it's always a good idea when we talk about TIF or tax increment financing that we give just a short synopsis on what it is, so anyone in listening to the meeting, whether they're here or online or in the future, understands it. So, Mr. Getch, how would you just give us the...
I think Councilmember Aho should give that to her.
Actually, Mayor,
actually, you could.
I could.
Yeah, I know.
I could.
A lot of us could up here.
And
but
Mayor, I
agree.
think at the last meeting for the last TIF district, you did a great job of explaining it. So
Well,
I don't know if I can. You did it. You covered it. Do you want to do it again?
I want you to right now.
You want to do it again? Sure. So the general concept is that you're able to capture the taxes on the development on the site where the development is occurring for a certain number of years. So you're basically taking the taxes that you would collect on that property and actually putting it back into the redevelopment of that property that would not happen but for those tax increment dollars being used. So you see many cases of blighted property or property in a kind of a difficult position. That was a case actually with our mall several years back. That was one of our largest tax increment financing districts where the city stepped up to say, we're going to take 10, 15 years of future tax receipts and put them up front or over time into the redevelopment of the project. And there will be such a time later on then where that district will end in the full realized value that you would not have, but for that tax increment project comes back onto the tax rolls.
So am I correct that it's the tax you're capturing on the increased tax base, so it's only the additional tax that you never would have gotten anyway, and then you're pooling that, and then I'm putting it up front to build infrastructure that helps the project occur, and then after 20 years it expires, and then we begin to gather taxes. So a lot of people don't realize that the Mall of America is not generating all the tax, correct? That
Correct.
Probably many people think that it would or should, because so much of it was put into TIF. And it, of course, never would have occurred. So you used important words, the but-for clause.
But-for clause.
But for this, it would never have been able to occur. So.
And you're right, Mayor, there's a base value that's set. So the description of the increment is the difference between that base and the higher level of value due to the development.
And the bottom line is that we're not just giving someone free money
No.
that the city has to generate and give to someone. It's just the tax deferred.
Correct.
Yep, zero-sum for us in a sense.
Right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you for asking for the clarification.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember
I got,
Farber.
I got a question for Mr. Gashaw, a second. Rick, could you, I don't think a lot of people also know what inter-fund loan agreement is. Could you explain that a little bit?
You know, we're going to give the city attorney a little time in the sun right
Just
now.
wanna give him a chance to speak a little bit tonight.
He drafted the agreement, so we'll let him speak to
So I
it.
can tell it's a good idea to define it a little.
Yeah.
So during the course of development, you sometimes spend money that you will be receiving later. And so this allows the city to advance funds from one pot of city money into another. And the federal government in particular likes to see a loan agreement for that as opposed to just an inter-fund transfer. It will always come back to us, so it's not spending money that is never replaced.
So it's just basically a formalized transfer.
Yes, that's a wonderful way to describe
Well,
it.
thank you.
Good questions. Anyone else? If not, a motion?
Well, since now I really understand what's going on, I'd love to move to adopt a resolution modifying the redevelopment plan for redevelopment project area number 5, establishing TIF district number 24, Prairie apartment, and adopting a tax increment financing plan, and adopt a resolution approving interfund loan agreement, and approve and authorize execution of tax increment financing agreement for Parallel at Castle Ridge Apartments.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn the HRA meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, moving now back into the regular council meeting. I think it ought to say proclamations, presentations, and resolutions, because we have 2 resolutions this evening under this category. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I believe Mr. Lothammer will be covering the donations.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council members, the first item I want to tell you about is a seminar that we had at the Community Center for seniors. And they had an opportunity to have a presentation on living well, as well as take a fitness class, take a tour of the Community Center, and a free lunch. And that was all paid for by donations. We received $250 from Home Instead Senior Care and Prairie Bluffs Senior Living. So we thank them for making that possible for people to attend and learn more about healthy ways to pursue within the community center and the city as a whole.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution to accept the donation?
I would move to adopt the resolution accepting the donation of $500 to be used towards Live Well seminar from Home Instead Senior Care, $250, and Prairie Bluffs Senior Living, $250.
Is there a second?
Second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Lothammer.
Sure. The next event was at the Senior Center, and it was a senior resource fair. So we had over 40 different providers that were there for our seniors to come and visit and find out more about those opportunities. EPIA, which is Eden Prairie in Aging, they contributed $1,500. That paid for the event so that it was at no cost to the seniors, which was a motivational speaker as a part of that they could come to, and also copies of that speaker's book. So it was well attended and also something that provided more information for our seniors. So really appreciate our community businesses and organizations, especially stepping up to make those low-cost informational events happen.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution accepting the donation of $1,500 to be used towards the senior birthday party event and the Senior Awareness Month programs from Eden Prairie Professionals in Aging, EPPIA.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Just a quick word. I know some people think we have a large budget and we have a lot of taxes dollars coming in. These donations mean a lot because they allow us to do even more and take our tax dollars and take them further. So we really do deeply appreciate the money that comes in donated from different organizations. All right. Agenda, any items before we make a motion that you wanted to add or change within the agenda? Just one brief comment statement under council member reports that I will speak to. Is there a motion
Mr.
to
Mayor, I
approve?
have a short statement under the city attorney's report.
Should we vote on that?
I think you should.
You all okay with that? Okay.
I guess.
All right, we'll
get
add
to
that
them.
in there.
Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, any other additions? All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes. Any questions or changes you want to make on either one? The workshop held on Tuesday, November 12th, or the council meeting? Okay, if not, could I have a motion to approve them both?
I move to approve the following city council minutes. Council workshop held Tuesday, November 12, 2019. City council meeting held Tuesday, November 12, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain since I wasn't here.
Consent calendar. Any items you wish to question, pull, talk about later, vote separately? Anybody have any concerns? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar items A to O?
I'll move to approval of items A through O on the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, any final chance here to question anything? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. All right. Public hearings. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first public hearing is an applicant requesting to construct a approximately 69,000 square foot, 2.5-story parking ramp at 11,000 Viking Drive. The purpose is to increase the parking ratio on this site to better comply with the current office district standards. Currently, this particular site is parked at 2.77 stalls per 1,000 feet. It is attached to Life Touch, if you're familiar with Life Touch, it does have lower parking standards than is quite typical, and the construction of this ramp would bring that ratio closer to an industry standard of 4 stalls per 1,000. This is an existing PUD that was approved in 2003, and the applicant is here to provide a presentation in an overview of their project, and the applicant and city staff could answer any questions that you have prior to the public hearing or after the public hearing.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Eggleston. I'm a development manager with United Properties, and I'm here tonight on behalf of United Properties. United Properties is an investor and developer of commercial property, senior housing, and residential land. Our address is 651 Nicollet Mall, Suite 450, Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're happy to be here this evening and very happy to have received approval from Planning Commission back in October. Since that time, we have addressed all concerns raised by them. I'm joined this evening by Mark Williamson with Edfar Architects, who will be providing our presentation, and we are also joined by Pete Moreau with Sambatech. Unless there are any immediate questions for me at this time, hearing none, I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Council members, for inviting us here tonight. I appreciate the Planning Commission reporting on the meeting.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Thank you. As Ms. Eggleston mentioned, the parking ramp is to provide additional parking for new leasing opportunities to better account for increased parking requirements for future tenants' use. And it's not moving. Sorry. The parking structure will be built on the easternmost portion of the surface parking at the existing property will not involve any new removal of landscaping, trees, or natural plantings. In fact, the structure increases the, as you can see on the eastern side of the parking ramp, surface parking. This area was designated for future parking as part of the 2003 Life Touch Phase 2 submittal master plan. So we're utilizing that same parking area. Next, please. As part of this approval process, we are requesting 3 variance and PUD waiver requests, which were approved by the Planning Commission. First being allowable height. The accessory structure is only allowed to be 15 foot, but we're requesting an additional 6 inches at the perimeter and 26 foot at the center, where the ramp increases partial level. We're requesting future approximately a 42-foot future elevator core, which will be in the far northwest corner of the site, away from the street. We're also requesting number of exterior materials to be, instead of 3 Class 1 materials, to only 2. We'll use precast concrete structural panels that will be primarily brick to match the building, with cream-colored accent striping to also match the buildings. The third variance is parking stall dimensions and aisle dimensions, requesting those to be smaller than the city requirements. However, they are within guidelines provided by the Urban Lands Institute, National Parking Association also. This reduces the structure size and footprint. Similar to other ramps in the area, including the 10400 Viking Drive ramp, just to our east, as well as a few other ramps along the I-494 corridor, Normandale Lake Office Park and Minnetonka Corporate Center included. In short, that is our presentation.
Great. Any questions of the proponent at this point?
I do. When would this, if assuming that you receive approval for this project, when would you start construction and when would you complete construction?
We would like to start as early as this coming spring, with the intent of being finished by the end of summer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one quick question. I mean, intuitively, there's no increase in impervious surface, so it shouldn't be any impact on water whatsoever, but I'm just trying intuitively to think. So all the water that lands on the top deck normally would have landed on the
Pavement.
and it's being captured currently, right, by stormwater facilities of some sort?
It's being directed off-site or into the stormwater sewer systems. We're actually increasing the impervious surface by almost 5,500 square feet, so that will help. We're also going to integrate a...
Wait, increasing the impervious surface?
I'm sorry,
the pervious surface.
Pervious surface. More planting areas surrounding the structure that were formerly asphalt. And we're capturing the stormwater in underground storage tanks below the level of the parking structure that will filter and slow down the water before it enters into the adjacent systems.
And that's not currently going on? That's new to this project?
Correct.
Right.
So it's an improvement,
Yeah.
basically, in
Yes.
stormwater handling.
And that's, as we all know, watershed districts are not just concerned about the clarity and purity of water. They want to slow down the volume of water, rushing down rivers down to New Orleans, whatever. But that's really good. And I'm sure the watershed district, have they been part of this at all? I wouldn't think they would have been, but they'd be happy about this.
Yes.
I believe they did.
They did
Go
look at
through have to apply for a permit,
Okay,
right?
great.
We will,
Any other,
before the approvals.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we open this up to the public? Okay, just be ready in case we need you back, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the council on this topic tonight, this project? Okay, council, what's your pleasure?
Well, seeing none, I would move to close the public hearing and adopt a resolution for planned unit development concept review on approximately 16.3 acres and approve the first reading of the ordinance for planned unit development district review with waivers on approximately 16.3 acres and direct staff to prepare a development agreement incorporating staff and commission recommendations and council conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
The only question I have real quickly, Mr. Getchell, I'm not sure who this would go to, but with all of the emphasis in the years to come, we hope on a different kind of usage of cars. You know, we're actually looking with apartment buildings and others in lessening the number of spaces, and we're adding it here. That being said, there's another tug on the other side of it that corporations are making cubicles smaller and putting more people into the 1,000 square feet, which is what, a 32 by 32 foot space. So it makes sense that they would have the tug on this side to get a little bit more parking. But the most recent buildings, Optum, others that have been built, Mr. Getchell, you said they're around 4, I mean, you think, or?
Yes,
So
but
this was under
Jeremiah
park from
has-
day one, and we knew that, okay.
Right, Your Honor, that's correct. This only, if they maximize the full ramp to the 4 stories, will only get them up to our code, basically. So they were given a waiver previously. So this isn't excessive parking, and we have been lowering our standards and even putting maximums in to try to address this issue of the future.
Sure, great, thank you. Council, anything else to discuss before we take the vote? We've had a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, great, congratulations. Look forward to seeing that go up. Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. All the next 3 items are related to our budget for next year, fees in our budget. So our next item is a first and second reading of an ordinance for a fee schedule for our 2020 fees. These are the fees that the city adopts by ordinance, and these are typically building code related, tied to state statute, and there aren't as many of these fees as you'll see in our general fee schedule. But we have published for this public hearing. We've provided information to the public on all of the different fee schedules and fee changes for 2020. Our staff in every single department of the city analyzes every fee, does comparisons, looks at cost recovery, sees what's happening in the market, and I think you'll see through all the different fee changes, most are within the rate of inflation. If there are significant changes, it might be a fee that we probably haven't changed in a long time, or we've seen a big difference in the service or in what's happening around us. But this is something we do each and every year. At the last meeting of the year, we ask that you approve, at least for this item first, the fee schedule for those fees that are approved by ordinance. And I guess I'll just cover the next item, which is C, but that'll be a second public hearing for all fees in general. So that would be community center memberships, plan development applications, the use of copies, kind of any fee that you would see in the city is covered under C as well. And all of those fees are described in detail and show the changes between 2018 and 2019. You are required to hold a public hearing on B. You're not on C, but our past practice has been to publish and hold a public hearing for all fee changes. And I will say too, on C, that also is all of our enterprise fund fees and utility fees. So you spent a full workshop going through all of our utility fees as well. So those are in the resolution fee schedule.
And just to let our residents know that are listening in that there's always this tension between how much should taxpayers foot the bill and how much should it be a usage fee, and there's always a balance. And I think our city has done a really good job of trying to strike that balance to the tune of, help me here because my numbers are vague, but $51 million budget and a $39 million comes from taxes and the rest comes from fees. I may be off a little bit, but that's close. But so we try to strike the balance, and that's what the next 2 public hearing topics are going to be about. So council, anything before I open this up to the audience? Okay, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the council on just this item B, first and second reading of the ordinance approving 2020 fee schedule? Council? If you want to come forward and ask and give your name and who just asked that?
I'll go up.
Oh, thank you.
There's no fees on here, just says C.
Sure. Do you want to?
Sure, yeah. So there's a public packet, and it can be found on the city's website. We have a copy here. It's a 400-page packet that covers
A 400-page packet of fees?
I think it's about maybe 50 pages of fees.
50 pages of fees?
I think so, yeah.
How many fees do we have?
We have a lot of fees.
Why?
Well, that's to provide services to our residents.
Okay. So you have 50 pages of fees, and you don't want us to see them, so there's nothing around we can see?
So
It's all there for you to see if you
okay.
want access to
yeah, we
our
absolutely
packet.
want our public and our residents to see it. So we can
Sure.
help you afterwards if you want to meet with somebody just to direct you right to the site.
Sure, we can go there.
Thank you. Appreciate
Could we
that.
get his name, please?
Yeah, give your name and your address for the record. That's public.
My name's Tony. I live down the street.
Tony, what and what's your address?
7200 Top View Road.
Okay. What's your last name, Tony?
I'll tell you in a little bit.
Okay. All right. With that, if there's...
Well, I would just say one thing. I did receive an email today, this morning, from a resident, and he just had some questions on franchise fees. I don't know if he's here in the public house today, but I'll just kind of bring up his topic so that we can kind of all hear it and address it, because I think it's good to do that. His comments were, this is from Brad Starr at 6264 Coteau Trail, and he mentioned that that he hopes that franchise fees to utilities would be, instead of being franchise fees, that they would be just direct taxes, because he feels that those fees are kind of not as transparent as if they were just straight out taxes, because of course the utilities do pass those franchise fees on to our residents.
How did you answer him in an email?
I have not answered. I did not get a chance to answer it yet, but that's a good question. And his other comment was on water charges, and he was stating that the water charges have gone up basically a fair amount he gives all the percentages. I'm not going to quote all those percentages in the last number of years, the last 3 years. But he feels that they've gone up quite a bit, and he's just wondering if those increases in those fees in the recent years are justified. And so I think it would be good just to address that topic here in this forum, so that people can hear why those fees have gone up and what we've done. So maybe Robert Ellis would like to address that one specifically.
Yes, Your Honor, City Council, I can address the rate increases on the water rates and the justification for that. As you know, it's one of the largest pieces of infrastructure the city owns. We've got several hundred miles of pipelines, and we've actually have a number of capital improvement projects that are in our near and medium-term capital improvement plan. And these are sizable projects. In fact, we're currently working on a ground storage reservoir that has a price tag of about $9 million. And again, that's to support providing fire protection and meet seasonal demands for water usage for all of our customers. We also have 4 new wells planned in the next 10 years in our CIP, and those have a price tag of about $2 million apiece. So it is a very large system. It is very capital intensive, and it also has a lot of labor costs. We have a number of personnel that are out working day in, day out, fixing water main breaks, doing service repairs, and that goes with our sanitary sewer, our stormwater system too. So as we do each and every year, we take a look at our long-term capital needs for the system. We take a look at our annual operating costs, and we prorate that out into the future so that we can set a responsible rate to help recapture those costs for providing that service without relying on tax base. It is an enterprise fund. We like it to stand on its own two legs. So for us to be able to do that successfully, we have to monitor what our water rate or user charges are. And we do that in a responsible manner. We also compare to our neighboring cities to see what kind of rates they're charging, just to make sure that we're competitive, because we do want to be economically competitive as people choose to locate their businesses or perhaps even reside in Eden Prairie. And I know that with our current water rates, I'm taking a look at some metro area cities, about maybe 30 or 40 of them that we often compare ourselves to. And our water rate for the typical water user ranks the 15th lowest out of 33. So I say we are pretty competitive. We're lower than the 50th percentile, which is an area that I like to be. I don't like to be too high because that may seem that we're maybe not spending our dollars wisely. Also, being too low sends a signal to me that maybe we're not investing in our system the way we need to. So I think that through that constant rate analysis, staying on top of our capital needs, and the fact that we provide pre-softened water to our residents, which is something that is rather unique for municipalities, I think it is a good value for the dollar.
Thank you. And I would just like to add on to that as well, that to our residents, that in addition to pre-softened water, we're also looking at our system to make sure that in future years, like some communities have not kept up with their infrastructure. So in other words, if all of a sudden you get to a point in time where you have to start replacing a lot of your pipes, a lot of your infrastructure, and then you don't have the money to do that, that's really a burden, because then you have to start looking at how do you come up with that money. You either have to have a very large sudden tax increase, or you have to start assessing people to do that. And we've really, as a city, have done a great job, I believe, in looking at that, projecting out into the future when we might need to do that kind of work, and making sure that we have a sustainable system to accommodate that. And just one last comment, Mr. Ellis, would you say that, so we've had relatively larger charges in the past few years, but I wouldn't anticipate those remaining at that growth rate for the foreseeable future. Is that correct?
Yeah, Councilmember Aho, I would say that's correct. We've seen rate increases that have been a little bit modest here, maybe in the 5% to 8% range in the past few years. We're looking to stabilize that more to an inflationary rate of 3 to 2% over the coming years. So I think we've kind of hit that peak, and now we're dropping down to what you might anticipate seeing for just keeping up with the cost of electrical rate increases, chemical rate increases, but just more that inflationary.
Exactly. That's good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, also, don't we have on the water rates a usage, so that somebody who waters their, uses a lot more water than the average home will pay more on a graded level? So if you are watering your yard every day extensively, the whole summer you'll pay a lot more than someone who waters it only when the grass needs it, and that kind of thing. So there is a rated thing, and that's also to help people, encourage people to conserve water at a reasonable rate rather than simply squander it especially when it's not needed.
Great. Wanted to make a couple comments. One, Tony, you made me think of something here that it sometimes feels, I think, to people that are just sitting in a meeting, one meeting, or watching it from home, just going through channels and seeing us for 30 minutes. It may seem like we are acting on an issue like almost off the cuff or in the moment. And the truth of it is that we spend 2 years on a two-year cycle budgeting process. We as a council get quarterly almost updates depending on our workshops. We've seen this list several times in the last year. The list is government unbelievably transparent. I'm saying nothing against the corporation I work for, but corporate America has nothing on the government in terms of our transparency, and that everything's available, documentation, people can go out online. This is very, very visible, and if people at home or whatever want some additional assistance finding out or digging in some of our data that's online, please seek us out on that. Second thing, I just wanted to, it gave me a chance to think about how I would respond to the person person that wrote you, but I've never shied away from the fact that it is listed as a fee on our utility bills, and that's their choice, but it is a tax. And it's a tax that tries to recoup money back from those businesses that are tearing up our right-of-ways. And we're getting basically compensated back for the cost that's costing us to have them in our right-of-ways. The other thing is that it's really equitably spread, because if we don't go after the money that way, we have to raise taxes, which then is only the homeowners and renters, whereas this actually is being paid for by any entity that's in our city that has an electric bill or a gas bill. You know, the airport, churches, any public entity. I mean, places that typically normally we would not be able to have them participate in the wear and tear and costs that they're causing on our roads or in our city. We're able to recoup some of that. So we're one of a dozen or so cities now in the state that have this franchise bill. We have about, Mr. Ellis, help me if I'm a little bit exaggerating, I don't think so. I think we have $100 million or so liability on rebuild of roads if you stretch it out the next 50 years or something. Am I close? I don't know. But we had cities bank zero on that. They're not even really traditionally been allowed to put money away for that. It would come out of regular taxes anyway. So to what Councilman Barajo said, typically cities will fund it either by just huge increases to our tax bill in the moment, or they'll assess it out to homes. And we know from our neighboring cities that shall remain nameless in the moment that they're dealing and struggling right now with their residents upset about $26,000 assessments because they're tearing up the road in front of their house and rebuilding it. Our belief is that once that road gets built in Eden Prairie, when you bought it and your developer built it, you'll never be assessed that again for the cost of what are we up to, $5 per utility fee, so $10 a month, $120 a year. You do the math. It's a great deal for us as a city not to have that huge, when you sell your house, that buyer will not have the $30,000 liability out in front of them 10 years out, 15 years out. So the franchise fee structure, I think, was one of the more brilliant, I don't know who came up with it, but one of the smartest things I think we've done as a council in all the 23 years I've been on here, and I'm so proud of it. And I brag about it everywhere I go with other cities, especially those cities that are struggling and getting beat up miserably by residents, maybe legitimately, who say, I've paid my taxes for 30 years, and now you're hitting me with a $26,000 assessment, special assessment. Yep. If you want your new road built, and we will never have to do that. So I just wanted to, sorry, I
think it
got a
is
little bit in the weeds there, but I wanted to make sure that.
I think it is one of the most equitable ways to to fund that process.
So I don't even know where we are now. I think we're on C, and we haven't had a motion there, right?
You have not. You are in the public hearing of B.
I got a question
Just
for
a
Mr.
second,
Ellis.
just a second. We're not.
Sure.
We're not in.
Oh.
We will have a chance to have one more public hearing in the. Are we? Wait. Are we still?
No, we're still in.
Oh, we're still in. Please.
Mr. Ellis, so, going off of what Mayor Case was saying, I was reading the papers too about all these cities like St. Paul and Minneapolis. All of a sudden, like, their water pipe bursts and they get smoked with like a $25,000 assessment. What are the chances for one of our pipes bursting and we get, smoked with one of those assessments? What percentage chance of that's going to happen?
Your Honor, City Council. So I would say if we do and when we do, they happen. In fact, yesterday we had a water main break. There is no cost to the resident for that. That is a cost built into our system. Our rates support the cost to replace those water mains. The homeowner would have a responsibility for their service line. So if the service line on your property that goes directly into your home were to malfunction, break, become clogged, if it's a sewer line, that generally is a homeowner expense. But anything that's in a main that's out in the public right-of-way is the responsibility of the city, and we take care of that, and that's funded 100% through the user fees that we generate.
So would you recommend then, homeowners and...
Tony, just a second. Two things. One, you got to stand at the mic. And second, you've got to give us your last name. If you're going to be part of this meeting tonight, which we're really thrilled with, we want to find out who you are.
Tony Morimoto, phonetically spelled. So would you recommend that, people in our city just, add on their $5 a year for insurance to ensure that, just in case, that kind of happens as part of the homeowner's insurance?
No, Your Honor, City Council, it's a personal decision. I think you have to weigh the risk of the age of your home service line, the maintenance that you've done on it. And if you feel that there's enough risk there that an insurance policy would be to your benefit, I would urge you to do that. Most of our community is relatively new. These water lines are designed to last 50 to 75 years, so that might help you make that determination on the risk.
Okay, I'm confused. I don't know where we are. Are we
So you-
voting
you-
on B or C?
Yes, B.
B. So we've got to close the public hearing and then vote on B, and then we'll open up C. Okay.
I would move to close the public hearing. And then, do you want a motion?
go ahead, yeah.
Okay, and approve the first and second readings of the ordinance updating the fee schedule for administration of official controls and adopt the resolution approving the summary for publication.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any more conversation within the council? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Mr. Getchell, C. You kind of already spoke to it. Do you want to add
I did,
anything
Mayor.
else?
No, I'll
Just
just,
like to add, if I could, just add one more comment for Tony and for anyone else that has questions, and I think you kind of alluded to it. We do want you to be aware of all the fees, and it does seem like 50 pages of fees sounds excessive. But once you start looking at the categories, I mean, and you look at, building fees and fees for renting park structures and fees for ice time and, fees for the community center, just the fees for the community center alone, there's many, many different levels of fees. So if you want to rent a room at the community center. So it sounds like that we really have a lot of fees, but there isn't really any there that I would say are unnecessary. And as you see them, you would say, okay, well, I'm really not impacted by very many of these fees. It's just that you have to have fees for everything to make everything fair and equitable to all residents, businesses, and users of the community property and goods. So take a look at them. We want you to be comfortable with them. I don't think any of them are excessive or out of line, but feel free to go through them all. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
No, good clarification. Mr. Getchell.
yeah, as Councilmember Aho said, it's every single park fee, renting a canoe, renting a park shelter. All 6 departments of the city have fees associated with them, of which many people may choose not to use those fees. They're not applicable to everybody. But so this section, C, is where 60 of the 70 pages are the fees related to general city services, and all this requires is a public hearing and adoption of a resolution.
Great. So, council, before we open up to public hearing, any questions or comments? Okay, this is a public hearing on this item C, approving the 2020 fee schedule for city services. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the council on this item? Council?
I move to close the public hearing and adopt the 2020 fee resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further conversation? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to item D, Mr. Getchell.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. On September 3rd, you adopted a preliminary budget and tax levy that this evening requires final approval. Finance Manager Sue Kachiver and I will go through a presentation presenting you with some detail in the 2020 budget, and then we ask that you hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution certifying the budget and tax levy for 2020. I will turn things over to Ms. Kachiver.
Thank you, Mr. Getchell. Mayor, council members, members of the audience, and folks at home. We're pleased to present some information on the 2020 proposed budget and tax levy. So the meeting tonight, the purpose is to solicit public input on our proposed budget and tax levy. Notice was sent out about this meeting on everybody's tax statement that you received in November, letting you know about your estimated taxes. And so we hold the hearing after you receive that, and it's a requirement of state law that we actually have this meeting. So I'd like to go a little bit over the budget and the tax levy and some of the tax impacts for 2020. So up on the screen is a budget summary, and as you can see, the total budget is increasing 3.1%. The general fund is increasing 3.3%. The general fund is the fund that you're
will be most familiar with all the city services that you're used to seeing: police, fire, and public works. It's all the general services of the city. We also levy some for debt, so we issue debt for various projects, for example, a fire station, and then we pay that, that back over time. So we levy for debt $2.5 million a year, and then we have a small capital levy of $400,000 a year, and that goes into a capital fund and helps to fund projects that don't have other funding sources. For example, we'll use that for some trails work and sidewalks and many other projects for the city. So this is a summary of the general fund revenue. Total revenues are going up 3.3%. Property taxes this year are going up 3.8%. Licenses and permits are going up 1.4%. So two big categories in there. Building permits and fees are going up 6%. We increase that, those fees 6% every other year. We find that our customers and the developers like it that way, but it's going, cable TV revenue is actually going down. We had overestimated that for 2019, so we're bringing that down more to what we expect. So the total revenue there is going up 1.4%. Intergovernmental revenue is pretty flat. The big drivers there, we receive police pension aid and fire pension aid of about $500,000 and $400,000. It's going down a bit because some state aid that we receive from the state of about $52,000 will no longer be receiving. Charges for services is going up 1.5%, and a big driver of charges for services is the park and recreation programs, and those are going up 1.7%. And then other revenue includes a lot of miscellaneous sorts of things. It includes interest income, it includes fines and forfeitures, reimbursements, contributions, and the biggest increase there is actually some interest income. Rates have been up recently. They've also moderated back down, but I think we have a conservative enough budget for that. And this just kind of shows you how the budget's broken up. So about 74% of the general fund budget comes from property taxes, 13% from charges for services, 8% licenses and permits, 3% intergovernmental revenue, and 2% is the other revenue. So for the expenditures for the general fund expenditures are going up 3.3%. So we have a balanced budget with revenues equal to expenditures. Overall, the budget, our budget is made up of 62% of wages and benefits. We are a service organization, so many of our cost changes are related to, wage increases for employees, health insurance changes. A couple of other changes, you'll notice administration's going up 6.9%, and that's related to elections. We have an election every other year, so we see that go up. Community development, that's going down. Community development finished the comprehensive plan, and so that was a $75,000 reduction in the budget. And the other thing I'll point out is fire. That's going down a bit. The amount that we were required to contribute to the fire relief pension went down about $290,000. And again, this just shows the breakout of the different departments, with police at 32% and community development at 5%, and then the other departments in between there. This is a summary of our debt. So we have 4 different debt issues right now that we're paying off with the general tax levy, and we have a stable tax levy. The property tax levy, so in total, the property tax levy is going up 3.4%. So the general fund is 3.8%. The capital improvement fund levy is flat. The debt levy is also flat. When we reduce for fiscal disparities, the total levy is increasing 3.4%. So the tax impact on the median value home of $413,800 is going up $42 or 3.3%. On an apartment valued at $5 million, it's going up $730 or 3.8%. And for a commercial property valued at $2 million, it's actually decreasing $155 or 2%. So that's the portion of the taxes that goes to the city for city services. And this is a summary of the total property tax impact. So that includes the city, but it also includes the county, it includes the school district and some other miscellaneous taxing districts. So residential is going up 2%, apartments 2.8%, and a commercial is going down 1.3%. This shows the property tax distribution of a median value home. So when folks pay their property taxes, 25% goes to the city of Eden Prairie, and 34% goes both to the school district and to the county, and then 7% goes to those other taxing districts. And then this gives the distribution for commercial property when they pay their property taxes. So 31% goes to the fiscal disparities program, 23% goes to the state general tax, so the city ends up getting 12%, and the county 16%, and the school district 15%. So for the tax levy and the tax impact on citizens, so the total cost for your city services is about $111.17 a month. About $104.81 is for those general services out of the general fund, and then $6.30 for debt and capital. And then this just gives the monthly cost of city services for each department. So Public Works is $13.69, Park and Rec is $28.08, Fire is $13.67 a month. Police is $33.88. Administration is $10.20, and community development is $5.29. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Getschau.
Thank you, Sue. You know, based on the crowd tonight, maybe I need to parcel out of which area our legal fees come from within the... So Sue did a really good job of covering the numbers. I'm going to maybe put a little bit of a story behind some of the numbers. And the mayor mentioned this earlier, that the numbers don't just come suddenly or necessarily out of thin air. There's a lot of time that goes into planning a budget. And there's a lot of other factors that go into planning a budget. So in this case of the schedule, we actually start our two-year budget process at the beginning of the year, and the council spends quite a bit of time doing some strategic planning. We actually ask our residents what their thoughts are in our city services, and we take a statistically valid survey sampling of each and every one of our city services and our strategic initiatives, and ask our residents what they think. There's a point in time, it actually occurs in May, where we're kind of focusing on 4 years at one time. We're evaluating how we did the prior year. We're currently working in the given year, which is 2019, and we're starting to plan for 2020 and 2021. So there's just kind of a lot of moving parts with a city's fiscal operation. As we move into the summer, we start spending some time kind of drilling down into what our each line item is going to be for our budget in 20 and 21. A recommendation is made to the city council in the summertime, and they need to adopt a preliminary budget and levy in September. We usually call that the ceiling because that's a point in time where you could lower your budget or levy, but you can't raise it any further. And as Sue said, each and every taxpayer receives a statement of what their proposed taxes are for the following year and invites them to this meeting. So that's where we are tonight. A lot of this goes back to the budget, what's in behind all the numbers, starts with what we like to call 6 of our overarching goals of providing services to our community that was last updated by the city council probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and involves being a safe city and focusing on public safety, delivering high quality, efficient services in a preserved and beautiful environment. Also doing so in an innovative and sustainable way. I used to have slides in this budget presentation that would focus on these are maybe 6 things that we did that kept that levy lower than you would have known based on some of the work we've done. I have a couple of those slides this time, but focused in a few key areas. And we want to build on our sense of community, and we're a very economically vital city. When it comes to those survey results, I just wanted to put one slide up here that encapsulates the results of the survey that we received from our residents in the spring. And that was, we are a very desirable place to live and raise a family. Public safety is very important, and we're considered a very safe city. We get some of the highest ratings in the nation, not just in Minnesota, in certain areas of our services. So I think it's in 66 different city services that we ask about, and 18 of them are in the top 1% of the nation of our city peers. And obviously, Parks and Recreation in Eden Prairie is a major highlight. Our economy is doing very well, but some of our residents are concerned about housing affordability. So the point is, we built a budget based on many of those goals in those survey results. For this particular budget, it's very important to us to provide high-quality services at a reasonable tax, bottom line. If you had to say it in one sentence. You'll see later on we're very competitive in doing that. Secondly, we had a presentation, I think it was a last meeting, where we borrowed money for the ground storage reservoir that Robert talked about earlier. At that meeting, our AAA bond rating, the best bond rating, the highest rating that you can achieve, was affirmed. So we understand that. Sue talked about having a balanced budget. We're probably one of the only levels of government that's required to do that, but we are. And being very conservative in how we estimate our revenues or expenditures, and also doing advanced 10, 15 years of capital planning. We do that in Eden Prairie. Also, our sense of community and community identity are something that our city council, I would say, for the last 5 to 7 years has made a pretty big commitment to. Some of our previous survey results said that we provide an excellent level of service at a wonderful cost, but there's more that we can do to build our community with more events, more activities. We've done that. We've done quite a bit with public art, with enhancing our celebrations, adding new community celebrations, and communicating in as many different ways as possible, be it 24/7 online through different platforms of communication, digitally online or in person. Couple different areas to highlight in this upcoming budget. One is sustainability. So our budget includes many of the different pieces that are related to being a sustainable Eden Prairie, including major conversions to LED lighting, a major undertaking in the solar operation to where we could say after our community center has its solar array complete that 100% of the city's electricity is generated through solar. We're going to be moving further into that with fleet electrification. And in 2020, we are going to be rolling out an updated and brand new climate action plan. Actually, it'll be our first climate action plan coming off the heels of an energy action plan. Housing is also important, and housing is also built into the budget. If you were here for the HRA meeting earlier, there's a lot of discussion about the powers of an HRA and a city council in providing housing, all cycles of housing. And so this kind of gives you a snapshot of some of the money that we receive from the federal government, some of the money that we provide in tax increment financing in our HRA levy. And I think the mayor alluded to this with the HRA meeting, that we did create a housing task force to study affordable housing and housing issues this past year. And what's that? I'm sorry, Housing and Redevelopment Authority. So you have the city council, and the HRA is the city council, but they have the ability to do certain things related to housing and economic development. In some cities, it might be a separate authority, but in Eden Prairie, it's a city council. Next piece is our employees. As Sue said, we're an employee-driven organization. The majority of our budget is driven by the people that work here and provide the services. So we're proud to be a top workplace for several years in a row, and it's very important that we continue to look for efficiencies and innovation and maintain high employee morale and engagement. Couple quick highlights in this budget, focus on transportation. So we have quite a bit going on with light rail transit coming into our community and several different road projects. We're implementing our comp plan. You spent 2 years working on and planning for our comp plan that was approved, and now we're going to implement that. We have quite a bit going on with our trail maintenance and expansion and new buildings, Starring Lake being an example. We have 3 elections next year. It'll be the first time we've had 3 elections. We always kind of have an uptick in our budget in the even year due to an election season, but we will have 3 elections. We want to continue in our fire department to maintain our duty crew model that is still, in its first 10 years of providing scheduled service by our top-notch fire department. And this budget does include additional police officers in 2020 and 21 due to maintaining staffing levels and then certain issues that we're seeing in the community. And again, the council was briefed on all this throughout the spring and summer leading to tonight's presentation. So last couple slides show that, as Sue mentioned, the budget proposed increase for 2020 is 3.1. For 2021, and you'll do that work next year to adopt it, but we've already prepared it, 2.8%. This year's proposed levy, 3.4. Next year, 3.7. How does that compare with our peers? I said I think we have a competitive environment here where we could say that the average levy of some of our similar sized peers is in that 5 to 5.5% range. We only have one city of similar size that's lower than that, and the rest are kind of in that 4 to 7% range. When you look at the taxes that you pay, and again in a similar size city, and this is the taxes that are currently in 2019, we don't have the numbers for 2020. Again, of similar size cities, we're in that kind of bottom 4th or bottom 5th of what your city taxes would be in these communities. So we're very competitive there. Our market value, the value of our city, if we were to put our city up for sale, it would be $11 billion in value, and that's continued to increase since the recession. And that allows for us to actually have a tax rate, a raw tax rate that is proposed to decrease. And what I mean by that is there are people that I've talked to that have gotten their tax bills in Eden Prairie, and they've said my taxes are going down. The point that Sue had, I think I have this slide here, I do right here, that $42 or 3.3% increase is predicated on an almost 4% increase in your value. So if your value stays the same, your taxes will go down. So there are people that their value might only be going up 2% or 2.5%. Their taxes are going down from a residential point of view. But our rate, the rate of what we're measured at and taxed at, is decreasing for the 4th consecutive year. And then I think, I don't know if Sue mentioned this, but the commercial tax decrease, I think this might be the 4th or 5th year in a row that $2 million property would see a decrease. Again, we take that static $2 million. Obviously, property does grow with time. Just want to mention really quickly, I don't want to get bogged down in this, but the city participates, all cities in the 7-county metro area participate in the tax-based sharing program, where a percentage of all the commercial taxes in every city in the 7-county area goes back into a pool. And then it gets sent back out again to the communities based on a formula. We as a city, we are second still to Bloomington. Minneapolis is actually making a pretty quick run with their development as a contributor, as someone that's giving more to the pool than we're taking. It's the only program like this that exists in the country, but for transparency purposes, I always like to say, if that program did not exist, if we weren't part of this commercial tax-based sharing program, that median valued home taxes for next year would actually be 8% lower due to that program. It's probably a good time to mention, too, that our city does not receive what's known as local government aid. So the state of Minnesota provides 60 to 70% of the cities in Minnesota with a direct dollar amount for their budget. And there's a good reason for that, because there are many small cities in Minnesota that would rely on the state for providing some of those services. We don't receive that money, and we're a major contributor to this program that at the end of the day affects people's taxes. And lastly, what is kind of the value proposition that we're maintaining services to over 63,000 residents and 2,500 businesses? And these are some of the indicators of the service levels that we provide in terms of, you know, streets that we have to plow, parks that we maintain, and police calls that we take. So with that, Mayor and Council, that concludes our presentation. We can certainly answer any questions that you may have, and we are, as Sue said earlier, obligated to hold a public hearing on the budget.
Correct. I think that's an excellent presentation. Thank you, both of you, Sue and Rick. Council, questions before we open it up as a public hearing? Yes, Councilmember Narayan.
Well, first, I just want to say to Sue and Rick, it's a great presentation. Well, very well done, systematically taken from the first slide all the way to end. I think the residents will get a good view about the tax structure and so on. And I just want to highlight the other part. I know Rick, every time I ask him, we are the fourth lowest tax city among our neighbors, and that should be really proud. And I think a lot of work goes to the city staff to make that happen, to provide the efficient services. The other point, I think, I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, the total tax, the city tax only 25%?
That's correct.
Like 25% that we control, the other 75% controlled by the Hennepin County and school and other part of the organization. So it's great work, and thank you.
Councilmember Nelson.
Not sure if it should come here or after closing the public.
To you.
Maybe I'll just move to close the public hearing at this point.
Well, we haven't opened it,
Okay,
so
then let's do
but-
that first. I'll come back.
probably should open first, yeah.
Yes.
So this is a public hearing, open to the public to give their input. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to give the council any feedback or just to talk to us about this topic tonight of certifying our property tax levy and improving our budget? Seeing none, Tony Morimoto or Morisoto?
You got it, baby.
Morimoto.
Good question. When's the last time we lowered property taxes?
So let me answer that one. Because some of us have run a lot of campaigns up here. So the last time we lowered property taxes was the last time we decreased in population. I don't have any clue when that was, because I don't think it's ever happened. So in other words, ever since 1853, we have grown and grown and grown and grown, and the needs have grown and grown and grown and grown. So as long as we increase at rates that are comparable to the expanding population that we now have to serve, I think that would be the bigger issue. If we were increasing rates so high that we were surpassing the population. But we don't go down because our population doesn't go down. Does anyone,
Well, all I would add is, all I would say is I think it depends on kind of what you're asking. So we have a budget, so that, you know, when do you increase your budget? We have a tax levy. As the mayor said earlier, the taxes are about 70% of the budget. So there's other sources of money, and there have been years in the last 10 years where we did not raise our tax levy. So that's occurred, but the budget's still been increased. And then lastly, I'll say our tax rate. So again, absent the value of your home, our tax rate is decreasing. So I could actually make an argument that taxes are going down in this budget because the tax rate is decreasing, but the levy is increasing, the budget is increasing. So it may depend on kind of from what area you're asking from.
That's a good answer, Councilmember Aho.
So I was elected in 2004, started serving in 2005. I think for 3 years, I think in 2000, if I recall correctly, and I don't know if someone can check my history, but I think in 2006, 7, and 8, we had 0% levy increases. While doing that, we were able to increase our service levels by using technology and other means to increase our service delivery, but reduce the costs. And we really looked into every aspect of our budget and trying to find ways where we could reduce spending and reduce the costs. And it really came at a good time because, as you recall, 2008 and those years were bad years from an economy perspective. And so it really was helpful to have those years of 0% levy increase. But
And just to show how complicated that is, because you and I were conversing about that idea a lot during those years, is that your levy can be 0 and people's taxes could go up because the formula, because the shift from apartments to commercial. And so we've got the three forces that are interplaying. So you've got the budget, the levy, and people's taxes. And all three of them can be different percentages. You'd think they'd be correlated and move together, and they don't always. They obviously are related. But Councilmember Nelson.
I guess I would like to thank city staff because once again, we've got some of the highest services in the Twin Cities, the happiest people with how their city is run, and yet we're in some of the very lowest taxes in the Twin Cities. It's always a good trick to be able to give everybody pretty much what they want and the type of place to live in, and yet be in the lowest group of taxes. So being able to do this and run the city the way we do, I greatly appreciate as a council member, and I think most of the people of Eden Prairie agree with it as well.
So just a moment, Councilmember Freiberg. I'm just conscious that we have not closed the public hearing. What I'd prefer to do, are you leaning forward to tell me that as well, Mr. Russo, or no? Oh, you're just leaning forward. You're okay, right? You're not like
He's anxious about his
like passing out on me or anything.
He's anxious about his report.
He's anxious. Okay, that's right. So can we let's let the audience have any chance, and we'll close it, and then we'll go to any other council member item or comments. So is there anyone in the audience still that would like to continue to, or in Tony's case, continue to give some feedback? Yes, please.
So when we have the next crash, and let's say property values drop by 20%, do we have a plan to drop the budget?
Say that again.
If property values drop by 20% in the next crash, do we have a plan in place to lower the budget by 20%?
Well, here's what I would say about that, and it's kind of complicated, but let me try to make it as clear as I can do. So basically, our budget is our budget. So right now, we're adopting a budget of $51,610,456. So that money, we have to, if our budget is that, we have to raise that much money. So a certain percentage comes from property taxes and a certain percentage comes from fees and all the other things that we discussed here tonight. If all the property values in the city go down by some percentage, say 20% in your example, if they all go down by 20%, we still have to raise that $51 million. But if they all in aggregate go down 20% evenly between residential, commercial, industrial, and apartments, your property taxes would stay the same. They would not go down, but they would not go up potentially. So basically, we're, all the residents and businesses and properties in the city of Eden Prairie share that budget, and it doesn't really matter if the values are going up or down. We're still raising that amount of money.
So an example, during the Great Recession, we had a tax base going into it, $10.5 billion or something, and I believe we dropped right below $10 billion. Now we're back up to $11.5 billion in tax base. So to Councilmember Ajo's point, that gets shared among all the tax-paying commercial apartments and homes. That's why if you have a declining tax rate, that's a really good thing, because that means that your tax base is growing. Some people ask, if a big, huge development just came in, shouldn't that lower my taxes? Well, it does in essence, or it keeps them going up lower than what they would have gone up, because it lowers your tax rate. I remember a city in the Northeast, St. Paul area back in the 80s, they did not pass 4 or 5 straight referendums. People started to move out, declining tax base. I mean, their tax rate was climbing every year, and it took them a decade to crawl out of that. So when you're in the fortunate position of Eden Prairie, where our tax rate is declining year after year, we are a healthy economy, probably one of the most healthy economies of, and take this, Edina and Bloomington, but probably one of the most healthy economies in the Southwest area. So, let's see, Tony, did that answer well enough? Because I want to make sure that I get to. Well, come forward if you're going to. We just want you on the mic and recorded.
If we don't have that money, what would you cut? Like, if you had to cut it by $10 million, if you had to cut the budget, what would you cut? I mean, is that a good plan?
Thank you.
If you don't have the money,
I'll take
right?
this, but
Okay.
so hypotheticals are interesting and they're fun, and we often will sit around and talk sometimes. But in reality, you look back in history, that hasn't occurred, and if it did, we would face that. And then we would probably go back to the public, and of course, we are the elected officials that would have to struggle through this, and we would figure out what gets cut. Clearly, public safety is tops, right? And we would have to prioritize those. But so, I mean, we could spend a whole lot of time the what ifs, right? I mean, across this nation, state, county, city, but we've had a track record here for 30, 40, 50 years of phenomenal economic stability. And a lot of it because of the great councils we've had prior to us being up here, and we're standing on their shoulders. So and our staff today, I mean, we have amazing staff. Phenomenal city attorney. Yes.
I would just add one thing to that, and you know, it's always hard. I mean, because you look at the money that you're collecting from residents as from taxes, and you say, well, is someone going to be? What's the return on investment that they're making? So really, when you're collecting our taxes, it's an investment into the community. What is the return on that investment? And we really look at that carefully and consider that. And when we're setting budgets and taxes, we look at our community surveys and look at what are the results of those community surveys and what services do people value. I mean, I would say, like, for example, snow plowing. I mean, everyone wants their street plowed out. I mean, you would not say, okay, well, let's do with less money towards snow plowing. Let's not do quite as good a job. Let's only plow it when we have 4 inches of snow as opposed to 2 inches or something like that. And so we really look at what are the services that people value, what level of service do people expect and want, and then how much does that cost? And so we weigh those things. And if it got to a point where we had to hypothetically reduce, we would have to look at all the services that the city provides and make judgment calls, and we would ask for input, I think, from our residents.
Tony, I appreciate your questions. If you have more questions, we really encourage you to come in, and we'll get some staff people to meet with you and connect and get any questions answered. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the council on this topic tonight? Okay, seeing none, council, if you want to close the public hearing and then make the motion.
Move to close the public hearing and adopt a resolution certifying the 2020 property tax levy to be $39,621,102 and approve the 2020 budget of $610,456 as reviewed by the council, and approve the HRA tax levy and budget of $200,000.
Is there a second? Okay, before we do vote, I just want to underscore again that the council has seen this, struggled with this, studied this all year, and including last year because it's a 2-year budgeting process, and this is probably the 3rd time we've had it presented to us. This is, we've been deeply involved. People talk about a budget is the reflection of the personality of the city at the time as represented in the council. So this is a very, very important document that we take very seriously. Any other discussion, conversation about this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Our last public hearing, ADA transition plan. Mr. Ellis, I believe. Mr. Getcho? Okay.
Mr. Ellis.
Your Honor, City Council, I am here tonight to discuss a project we've been working on for the past 18 months. It's been a combination of efforts between our Parks and Recreation Department, Public Works Department, and Community Development personnel, and it's the ADA transition plan. And I do have a short slide show or presentation that I'd like to go over with the City Council, explaining 1, what is an ADA transition plan, and 2, why are we doing it? Because those are logical questions you might be asking yourself. And get the presentation started. Very good. So the Americans with Disability Act is a federal act that was passed in the 1990s, and it was a civil rights law prohibiting discrimination based on disability. And there are a number of titles to that act I'm sure you're aware of. Title I, I believe, deals with employment discrimination. Title III, public accommodations. Title IV, telecommunications. Title V, miscellaneous provisions. But tonight I wanted to talk about Title II because that deals with accessibility in the public right-of-way. So the city of Eden Prairie, like other cities, the county and the state, are managers of public right-of-way. We are putting that in trust for the public's use. And with that comes a need to make sure that the right-of-way is accessible for all users of the community. And so our ADA transition plan that we've been working on is looking at ways that we can remove barriers to that accessibility, mainly in the form of barriers on our sidewalks, trails, curb ramps, and traffic signals. So the transition plan process that we've been working on over the past several months really started with going through guiding documents that are available through the United States Access Board, Federal Highway Administration, Department of Justice, the Minnesota Department of Transportation's Accessibility Advisory Committee. Hennepin County has a transition plan, the League of Minnesota Cities has guiding documents, and then of course all of our neighboring cities. So it is a very well-defined process for developing a transition plan unique to your agency. And it's, the important part about it is a lot of those guiding documents were created by people with disabilities, people that understand what it means to have an accessible right-of-way. So there's a lot of good information out there for cities that want to ensure that their rights-of-way are accessible. We also worked with our Human Rights and Diversity Commission as they deal with other ADA issues currently, and we received their input on the plan. On October 10th, they did endorse and offered a recommendation to the City Council to adopt this plan tonight. And then, as I mentioned, there was an internal committee made up of people from Parks and Recreation, our Streets Division, Engineering Division, and Housing and Community Services, because we all have a different perspective on the right-of-way, so it was helpful to have all those individuals together. So the transition plan really starts with your inventory. You need to know what you have in the right-of-way before you can decide what you need to do with it. So over the course of 2018, we had a group of surveyors that were out in the field, and they were inventorying all of our sidewalks and trails, looking for discontinuity or other barriers. They also looked at all of our curb ramps and our traffic signals. And examples of barriers, I've got a number of photos here that show the types of barriers we were looking for. And these are glaringly obvious barriers. But you can see the picture on the top left is just a sidewalk that hasn't been maintained. There is no curb ramp, so a person with any type of mobility issue, that's almost impossible to navigate. In the middle, you see a electrical pole right in the middle of a sidewalk, so somebody who's in a chair might not be able to traverse that because it's too narrow. Again, you see signs that are posted in the sidewalk itself. You've got a drain right down at the curb where that causes icing problems in the winter or flooding in the summer. Top right, you see a traffic signal. Well, the push buttons are a long distance away from the curb, so anybody who has mobility issues, that's a long ways they have to travel to push a button. And the buttons probably aren't the right height. There's a lot of other things that are non-compliant. And then you have construction. So there's a utility company that's dug up the sidewalk there, and so somebody might not even have the ability to push the button. And then you have a lot of driveways where you might have a sidewalk that is in good condition, but as soon as the driveway interrupts it, all of a sudden a person in a chair might not be able to negotiate through that. So the city went through all of our curb ramps, sidewalks, trails, traffic signals, and we did a condition assessment. So when we talk simply about our curb ramps, we have over 2,400 curb ramps in Eden Prairie. And I should highlight, I'm just talking City of Eden Prairie facilities. I'm not talking about any sidewalks, trails, or ramps or signals that are MnDOT responsibility or county responsibility. These are purely City of Eden Prairie responsibilities. So we looked at every curb ramp, and we gave a ramp a rating of 1 to 4. 1 means there is no facility, it's non-existent. 2 meant most ADA standards were not met, and there were no truncated domes, and those are the tactile devices that a person with low vision or sight impairments is using to feel where the edge of the sidewalk is, the little bumps that you see. That's what a truncated dome is. And the reason that we created that standard is because in the 1990s, when most of our community was built, the standards were constantly changing. It was something new. So one year you might be building what at the time was perfectly acceptable, met all the ADA standards. 3 years later, those standards had all changed, and now it was non-compliant. Unfortunately, because of the time that our community developed, a lot of these were put in with good intentions, but as time progressed, we learned more about what works for people with disabilities. The standards changed, and so The truncated domes is kind of the timeline. If it didn't have a dome, it's probably completely non-compliant. If it has domes, it's a very usable curb ramp. There might not be completely compliant, but most components of it are. So that was kind of our differentiating between 2 and 3. So, and then rating 3 was some ADA standards met and there are truncated domes present. And then finally, rating 4, all ADA standards were met or proper documentation is provided as to why you couldn't meet that standard. So when you take a look at it, most of ours are in that rating 2, rating 3 category. Next, we looked at condition of all of our sidewalks and trails, so between the curb ramps. There we looked for cross slope issues, which would be as you're traversing this direction, the cross slope is, you know, how much, you can get up to 2% grade. Anything more than that, and you have a non-compliant cross slope. So, and really, if you're in a chair, the difference between a 2% and a 4% is unbelievable. It takes so much more effort to go straight on a 4% slope than a 2%. So we found 140 locations that were out of compliance for cross slope, 116 locations that had drainage issues, meaning pooling water. Water was not escaping from the trailer sidewalk. 117 driveway interruptions where perfectly compliant sidewalk, but then there's a driveway and it either tilts out of whack or it drops down too fast or there's some issue. Then we had 7 locations that were obstructions or obstacles. This would be the telephone pole, some other type of barrier that was located in the trailer sidewalk. And then running slope, 76 locations where the running slope, and that is the direction of travel. It has a certain slope it's allowed to go to. Anything steeper than that is out of compliance. So 76 locations where running slope was too excessive. And then finally, we looked at our traffic signals. So there are only 16 traffic signals that are managed by the city of Eden Prairie. The rest are MnDOT and the county. Of those, 15 were non-compliant. And when we say non-compliant, there are a whole host of components that have to meet the standard, from the size of the plunger button for the push button to how much force you have to use to activate the push button, the language that's there, the chirping, the tone locator so that persons with sight disabilities can locate that. So of our 16, really only one of them was compliant. I will say with our Preserve Boulevard project, we're bringing 2 more into compliance this year, but most of them are in a non-compliant state today. So once we had an assessment of our inventory, the next was to try to prioritize how do we make these compliance, because we know we can't do everything in 1 year. We need to be rational and thoughtful on where we make these investments. So we created 4 different priority areas, and they're all within a half mile of a certain feature. And the half mile was used because that's generally the walk shed that most people will undertake to make it to a destination. It's universally accepted as a walk shed for a destination. So half mile from a transit station, half mile from a community facility that would be an elementary school, high school, this building, a community center, the library, half mile from high and medium density housing, half mile from Southwest Transit bus stops. So through GIS, we can identify where those areas are. This is half mile from transit stations, including the Southwest bus transit station, and then the light rails that will be coming on board in the near future. These are half mile from all the Southwest transit bus stop locations, half a mile from all of our community facilities. Again, this is the senior center, the community center, the city center, all of the elementary, middle school, high school, libraries, they're all located here. And then finally, the high and medium high density housing, where you have a congregation of people that more often than not rely on pedestrian or bicycle for transportation or transit services. So when you aggregate all of those together and you put those overlapping rings together, you start to see the heat map. So red is where you have all 4 categories or priority areas within the same area. Orange is where you have 3 overlapping areas. 2 would be the yellow, and then green would be where you just have one of the priority areas. So this is what we're using as an identifier where we have discretionary funding, where we're going after grant funds, where we need to look at focusing capital dollars for sidewalk, trail, curb ramp, traffic signal replacement. This would be the starting point. We want to see those dollars spent in these high focus areas first. Now, not to say that we wouldn't have a capital improvement project like, say, Eden Prairie Road. We're rebuilding that right now, and it's going to have sidewalk facilities with it, or trail facilities. It's not within one of these areas, but it is a capital improvement project, and we will make everything ADA compliant when we do that project. So it's not to say that we won't work outside of these areas. It's just when we have discretionary funding and we want to make pedestrian improvements, we would want to look to this map as a guide as to where to start. So the improvement schedule, we take a look at our 10-year capital improvement plan, and we have a number of projects listed in there. A lot of sidewalk trail reconstruction projects. We have all of our pavement management projects, number of roadway reconstruction projects, and then grant opportunities. So when we take a look at that 10-year plan, we average about 90 pedestrian ramps a year. And then when we look at other opportunities to make improvements, new development, and when we approve projects like the Arby's that was recently approved, Shields, we're asking the developer to make ADA improvements for those sidewalks that are around the perimeter of your building. So when we do things like that, we can add another 10 or so ramps a year. So we end up doing about 100 a year, and we've got 2,400. So when you project that out, it would take about 26 years of investments to make all 2,400 plus curb ramps compliant, and it would be a cost of about $13 million. We find that it's about $5,500 per ramp. You know, some can be a little bit more expensive, some less, but on average it's about $5,500 per ramp. So that's the improvement schedule that we've outlined in the ADA transition plan, and that's pretty similar to what other cities are seeing. It is a big investment. It's you know, it's very aggressive. It takes a lot of engineering. It requires acquisition of right-of-way in some cases. These are not simple projects to do, and they're not cheap. So we know that it's going to take a number of years and planning through our capital improvement program to do that. The other thing the transition plan does is it outlines, I guess, a process for making these improvements, ensuring we're doing it right. First, it identifies an ADA coordinator for the city that's charged with implementing this plan, and that would be the title of the Public Works Director. So the person in that position is ultimately responsible for putting together the plan, making sure it's being implemented, and if it's ever challenged, they'll be the individual that needs to be responsible for it. Also, staff training. There's a lot of design, understanding how to do a proper design. It's actually quite complex to make it perfectly compliant. It takes a person with a lot of knowledge on ADA standards, and as you've seen, we've built a lot of them, and a lot of them are non-compliant. So making sure that our engineers understand how to build it, so when you do make that investment, you don't have to tear it out and replace it. Also on the inspection and construction, making sure that our inspectors out there understand when they're going in with private development or other projects that they're being done properly. So staff training is a part of this. We also outline a grievance procedure. So if there is an individual who would like to see an improvement made, there's a process for them to approach the city, and that procedure would start with meeting with an individual from the engineering division, making your request. The engineer would investigate it, and if it's something that could be accommodated, they will include that in a future project. But if the engineer couldn't satisfy the complaint, then that would be escalated to the HRDC, the Human Rights and Diversity Commission, would meet with the complainant. They would come up with findings of the issue and offer a recommendation back to the ADA coordinator on what should be done. And then the ADA coordinator would try to resolve the issue. If still at that point the complainant wasn't satisfied, it would be appealed to the city manager, and the city manager would make the final determination. And that process is very similar to the process that exists today for other ADA issues. If somebody had a complaint or a request about a city program that's offered at a park, this is very similar to the process that they would go through as an appeal. So we're following something that's already instituted here at the City of Eden Prairie, but officializing it or memorializing it in the ADA transition plan. And then finally, beginning the implementation in 2020. So over the course of the last 18 months, we had worked through this plan. We think it's a good plan. I think the Human Rights and Diversity Commission agreed with that. They offered their recommendation. And quite frankly, this is a plan that if cities do not have an officially city council adopted ADA transition plans, in the future they'll be barred from receiving any federal funding. So it's something that is important and something that we do want to see get implemented here in the near future. We don't want to be jeopardizing any potential grant funds in the future because we don't have a plan. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Robert, in terms of cost, you kind of laid out a cost of about $13 million in implementation over quite a significant period of time. Was it 26 years, if I remember correctly?
That is correct.
So a long process. What about, in terms of the cost, I realize that probably a lot of the cost is man hours of engineering time to do the designs and things like that. But some of the materials, like those truncated domes, I always look at those sections of the ramp and think, you know, how many companies make those truncated domes, and you know, is there any way that we can work? There's got to be a fairly high cost to those. Is there any way that we can work with the state and other, you know, government agencies to congregate our buying power to get, you know, more efficiency and get better pricing on some of the common components that we would utilize to do our remediation?
You know, that's a good comment. I don't know if we have an ability to do that, partner with MnDOT or another city, but that's something we could look into.
Yeah, I would like to do that because I'm sure that those are not inexpensive, and you know, looking at the number of those that we're going to need, those plates, I assume that they're like steel plates is what I've seen in the past. So they've got to be a fairly high cost. So if we could kind of you get some efficiency out of buying as a big group, I think that might be helpful.
That's a good comment.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Councilmember Freiberg and then Councilmember Narayan.
Robert, I just got a question here for you. I know we need to do this. I'm having a hard time understanding that we're going to be able to do it over 26 years without having pressure put upon us to do it in a much, much shorter time. Because I'm thinking, when you start thinking about it, that the word is must, is the way I'm reading it right here. Are we not going to get a lot of pressure to sit there and really escalate this?
Councilmember Freiberg, you know, I don't believe so. I think when I look at our fellow cities that have similar plans, the vast majority shoot for a goal of 80% in 20 years, and that's really what our plan is. It's 26 years to do 100%, but 80% in 20 years. I think that's a very common standard. So we've tried to be compatible with that. I didn't want to be overly aggressive, one, because I didn't know if I could deliver it in less than 20 years, 26 years for 100%. But, you know, I suspect that if we are successful with grants, it might expedite that a little bit. We really haven't gone after grants for improvements like this, and that may be an opportunity to do more of these sooner. But I don't know that we're going to see a lot of pressure. I think if there is an issue, if an individual truly has an issue because they work or they're trying to get to a location where there is an accessibility issue, we're going to go out of our way to resolve that, because that's really what we're trying to do here. It isn't about how many you can do in a number of years. It's about making it accessible for the person that needs it today. So if we have an individual or a group of individuals that are making a request to make an improvement, I think we will work with them to try to accomplish that in the very near term.
Understood. I thank you.
Councilmember Narayan.
Robert, a couple of comments. Going back to Councilmember Aho's, I think the state does do negotiation, a lot of things, and contract. I don't know, we as a city, we leverage those contracts to get better deals, and if you don't, we should. A couple other points. Going back to the 26 years, and I hear that and say, wow, so far out that to complete this. And one area that I thought we also should focus senior homes. You know, that's the area that people may have to have the accessibility problems. So priority perspective, senior homes, I think, is a very important one. The other part I didn't hear you saying, I'm sure you already encountered, is we are rebuilding our sidewalks and traffic light stations and other things ongoing basis. So as a rebuilding process, we already compliance to the new standard, right? So hopefully that come along, just like you mention about the building shield another area, building an area, then that area that more ADA compliant. The last comment was, I'm not sure I heard, is the traffic light for blind people. I don't know, is there any special, I don't know any traffic light in Eden Prairie that or few. Okay, so is there another layer of work we need to do to compliance with that, which is different than the ramps, right? So the question, thank you.
Councilmember Narayan, maybe to go over those questions or comments that you have. So the state does have joint cooperative agreements that we use almost on a monthly basis, quite frankly. A lot of the things from vehicles to supplies are purchased through state contracts because they negotiate very good prices. So we can look to see if there are truncated domes that are available on that state contract. You made a comment about new facilities, and when we do reconstruction of facilities, we have always, when we've done a reconstruction project, the goal is to make them compliant when we're done. And the other thing I want to highlight is this plan only covers existing facilities. It really has nothing to do with new facilities, but we're always adding new facilities that don't exist, the extension of new trails and sidewalks, and when we do that, we're making them ADA compliant. So not only are we replacing facilities that we have out there today with this plan, we're also putting in new facilities that don't exist and never have existed as part of our standard capital improvement program. So you're right about that. And then finally with the traffic lights. So yes, I didn't mention that in that 26 years, all of our traffic lights would be upgraded as well. In fact, most of them are currently in the 10-year plan for replacement. So when they are replaced, they will be fully compliant. And that will happen much sooner than the ADA curb ramp being retrofitted. So
Thank you.
Council, we'll have an opportunity for additional questions as well. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council on this topic? So, yes, please.
So we have, what, 16 lights, 15 lights? Why don't we make them traffic circles? Then we can, and I mean, I'm sure you know this, but with traffic circles, the reason why they're so safe is it disrupts people and forces them to stop them from being distracted and force them to pay attention, which is why they're so much safer. And then, of course, you know, you have the added benefit, you know, there's no maintenance. It makes it much more safer for any disabled person, whether it be, you know, blind, they can just walk in there and feel very confident they're not going to get hit, which is, I can't remember the engineer's name, but the reason why he designed in that way is because he would walk backwards into the streets he designed and not get hit by a car. He'd get, you know, honked at, but he wouldn't get hit. So what do you think? What do you think about those?
yeah, Mayor Case and City Council. Tony, to answer your question, yes, we do routinely, when we do a reconstruction project, as a part of the design process, we're evaluating should a traffic signal or a traffic circle replace the traffic signal. In fact, Preserve Boulevard, that was an alternative that was thrown out there. We could prove that from a traffic standpoint it was efficient, but it did require a lot of right-of-way, and it would have required perhaps the taking of a home to do that. So there are other, I guess, drawbacks. It does require large amounts of right-of-way to accomplish that, and oftentimes right-of-way is our limiting constraint. But we do frequently evaluate traffic circle versus traffic signal when we're doing reconstruction, just to make sure we get this one chance over the next 75 years. We need to evaluate it. And sometimes we have implemented those, like up at United Health Group's campus, Optum campus. That was a chosen alternative versus a traffic signal. So there are locations where we've implemented that.
Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the council? Council, why don't we go ahead and close the public hearing? In fact, let me just ask, well, go ahead and close the public hearing, then we can move to the next step quickly.
Move to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any other conversation or discussion on this topic this evening?
I have a short one.
Go ahead.
I'm hoping that where we have sidewalks blocked by those poles, or those are on the top of our list to get those done. I really would like to thank you for this very thorough project, because we know that by 2030, about a third of the population will be seniors, and there will be more people with needs for getting around that might not exist in the same percentages today. So it's timely. I like what you're doing and how your plans are concise and well planned out there. And I'm glad we're taking such a serious look at doing this and making it right as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ready to vote? All those in, oop,
Got to make the
I
motion.
thought we did.
We closed the public
Oh,
hearing.
you are so correct. Thank you, thank you. Yes. Is there a motion with the rest of the motion to adopt the resolution?
Adopt a resolution approving the City of Eden Prairie ADA transition plan for the right-of-way.
Is there a second?
Second.
Now are we ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you. Moving on to payment of claims. Is there a, well, let me ask this. Any items to question or to pull out and talk about? If not, is there a motion?
I move for approval of payment of claims as submitted. Roll call vote.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Aho,
Aye.
Councilmember Freiberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Narayan,
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson,
Aye.
Mayor Case,
Aye. I was preparing for my next comment here. Sorry about that. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you so much. I want to read a brief statement. Rarely do we, as individuals, get an opportunity to have such a profound impact on one community, on one group of people, or on the legacy of one city, as has Rick Rosso. Rick Rosso has had an impact on Eden Prairie for 40 years of legal representation, 40 years of meetings, 40 years of making a positive difference here in Eden Prairie. And I don't know about the rest of you, I bet you agree with this, but I can honestly say that not one time in my 23 years of working with Rick have I ever questioned his judgment. I'm sure others maybe in the room have. I'm looking at your wife for a moment. But I have never questioned your judgment. Really, truly. I mean, that's phenomenal. Or even to think like, that's not right, or I never did that. Never questioned your advice, never questioned your counsel, not one time. Rick has represented Eden Prairie, protected Eden Prairie, and fought for Eden Prairie consistently and faithfully and passionately on behalf of the people of Eden Prairie. So thank you, Rick, for making a difference in the lives of the residents of this city. Thank you so much. I'm going to read a proclamation that we as a council, I don't know if we have to vote. I think we just adopt this. This just is. But proclamation tonight, whereas. And for your grandsons, there's a bunch of whereases, and I'll try to get through them a little bit quickly here. Rick Rosso has served the city of Eden Prairie for 41 years in the capacity of city attorney from 2001 through 2019, and as assistant attorney from 1978 through 2001. And whereas Rick Rosso has been the longest serving legal counsel in the history of the city of Eden Prairie. And whereas Rick Rosso has provided city council and staff with sound legal advice, and whereas Rick Rosso is a man of integrity, passion, and conviction, and whereas Rick Rosso's outstanding commitment to the city and community has been demonstrated by his professionalism and work ethic. He leads a balanced life while being dedicated in his service to the city. In his personal life, he is also an accomplished photographer, has a love for art, music, culinary arts, spending time with his family, and travel. And whereas Rick Rosso has dedicated countless hours to significant city projects, such as the Flying Cloud Airport and the closed landfill, two parts of your memory, I'm sure. And whereas Rick Rosso's leadership and legal guidance played a critical role in all of Eden Prairie's development projects during his tenure, including but not limited to Hennepin Village, Bear Path, Southwest Station, Von Mauer, Summit Place, The Colony, Bluffs at 9 Mile Creek, Windsor Plaza, the Optum Campus, Martin Blue, Margaret A. Cargill Headquarters, Elevate Mixed-Use Development, Prairie Bluff Senior Living, Shields, Trail Point Ridge Apartments, and Paravel Apartments, and on and on. Whereas Rick Rosso has been passionate throughout his career about providing affordable housing and helping underserved and less fortunate populations. Rick Rosso has played an important role in making Eden Prairie a vibrant city. Now, therefore, be it resolved that City Attorney Rick Rosso is recognized for more than 40 years of dedicated service and commitment to the city of Eden Prairie, and further, the Eden Prairie City Council does hereby proclaim December 3rd, 2019 as Rick Rosso Day in the city of Eden Prairie, and ask the community to join us in thanking City Attorney Rick Rosso for his wisdom, guidance, and many years of service adopted by the Eden Prairie City Council this 3rd day of December 2019 and signed by Ronald A. Case, the mayor. Rick, if you would come down front with me. This will be, I hope, in a prominent place for you in your office, but let's see, let's do that, man. Thank you so much for all your years and years of service. Thank you. All right. Do you want to say a few words now?
I do, yes.
Do you want to do it from up there? Or
No,
you good?
I do it better here. You've surprised and taken me back. Thank you so much for your kindness. I now understand why Alicia asked if I had Kleenex with me. So first, I want to follow through on the donation that we made at the last meeting and the challenge of the match. I told you that was really pretty ad lib that night. I've thought about it more and thought we're going to pre-fund the match. So I'd ask my grandsons to come up, and I'd like them to each present to the mayor a check for half of the remaining $1,500 to bring the total gift to $3,000. Thank you. So I want to thank you for allowing me to be your city attorney. I did a little bit of that at the last meeting. And I want to recognize the people who made it possible, because no one gets here on their own. So I learned at the police awards ceremony that first you thank your family, because I didn't do that at the police awards ceremony. And so you know my wife, you know she's here. You know her because she has accompanied me to many, many functions. She's been part of my work here. She's been totally supportive of all the hours and made it possible. My son, Michael, my daughter-in-law, Mona, my 2 grandsons, Sebastian and Dominic, my niece, Heather, and her significant other, Russ, are here tonight. Is practically my entire family in the Twin City area. So I want to thank all of them for being so supportive. I want to thank Roger Pauly. I stand in his place and on his shoulders. He was an excellent city attorney. He was an excellent mentor. He gave me tremendous responsibility in the early years so that your predecessors and you, Ron, got to know me and trust that I could do the job. Without Roger, I would not be here. I also want to thank some of your predecessors who placed their trust in me and who provided mentorship, leadership, and a vision. Mayor Gene Harris, a true statesperson, a person of integrity and courage, always an inspiration to me, inspiring me to do the very best I could. How could you not be asked for advice by Mayor Harris and not try to do your absolute best and even more? Mayor Gary Peterson served 1 term, was a man of conviction, a man of faith, and a man who put his beliefs ahead of re-election. He lost because he voted for a settlement that I helped negotiate. He and I were both hung in effigy in a public hearing. And he was the only council member that night who voted for the settlement. The rest of the council sent us back to continue the litigation over the landfill. Gary put his beliefs in front of his political career. He went on to serve in another community. He, like Gene, has passed. And then Mayor Nancy Terralukens. Probably during my tenure, the finest mayor in the Twin City area is perhaps the state of Minnesota. It was a joy to watch her mature in that role, finding herself in it upon Gene's death, and then being elected on her own and becoming a strong advocate for everything that you value in Eden Prairie. Being a listener, compassionate, and firm in her convictions, and always having Eden Prairie in her heart and the best. What can we do the best for Eden Prairie? And finally, I want to acknowledge another mentor, former Chief Jim Clark, a man of courage, of humor. He was a mentor to me while at the same time seeking my advice. And I will always value the time that I worked with him. These are the people who made it possible for me to succeed here. I also want to, and I thought long about this, whether I talk about anybody in the room, and I decided I needed to. I want to thank the current staff of the City of Eden Prairie. You know, but maybe all the people don't know, and I want to acknowledge it here tonight. You have an absolutely excellent staff, and they have been, for me, a joy to work for. It's not just a job. It was a joy to work with them, to be able to provide help and solutions to the issues that they brought forward. I've seen their creativity. I've seen their hard work ethic. To a person, Mr. Getchell, Ms. Jeremiah, Mr. Lodhammer, where did Mr. Ellis go? Did he leave? Mr. Ellis, Chief Weber, and Chief Gerber, who I've worked with not long here, but longer when he was in Excelsior. They are the very best of the best. I have served other cities. They are the very best of the best. You have a wonderful staff. And so the success that I have had is because I am working with such outstanding people. And you as a council, of course, have had the opportunity and the wisdom to continue to, you hired first Mr. Getcho, and you renew his contract every year. He kids with me at the end of those. You know, you and I are the only two who they get the year to year. And then he has the wisdom and has surrounded himself with, I think, all but Ms. Jeremiah and Mr. Lothammer were here when he arrived, but he's filled out the cast. And he's picked strong people, because that's the way a good leader thrives. And so I commend you on that. But I, in particular, on my way out the door, so I have not a lot of reason to, but sincerity to tell you that these are excellent people doing your work. And for me, I've enjoyed every moment working with them, even to the point of being on the end of the kidding and the jokes, which I said to Ms. Jeremiah the other day. She commented that I had been on the receiving end of some of the jokes, and I said, yes, but I'd worry if that ever stopped. And she said, you're right. So I want to thank you, two things. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. And I want to debunk a myth that Mr. Getchow has perpetuated about me. And that myth is that I was not born and do not remember where I was when Lincoln was shot. So It's been very wonderful, and my successor, Ms. Evavold, is in the audience tonight. If you'd stand, Maggie. And I know that she will do an excellent job for you. She is very talented, very smart, and is eager to do the work. So thank you again.
True passing of time. Let's get that back on. A true passing of time, and we just will really deeply miss you. I believe that's all the work to come before the council this evening. Is there, or is there anything else I should ask quickly? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn city council meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, meeting adjourned.